Hart jerked sideways, nearly toppling out of his pilot's chair as the overhead lights flickered and the old freighter's engine spat out a strangled hiss. "Don't die on me now," he muttered, smacking the console in exasperation. But the ship lurched again, and a cascade of sparks rained down from a misfiring hatch panel behind him. With a desperate slam of the throttle, he urged the vessel to keep pushing forward. Everything groaned, but the battered craft, named the Wayward Dream, somehow heeded him one more time and skidded into the docking bay of a derelict research station, drifting on the fringes of known space. The moment the Dream thudded onto the station's pitted deck plating, Hart's harness snapped open. He lunged for a fire extinguisher, yanked the release, and doused the console's smoldering corner with a foam that smelled like rancid eggs. Then, hacking through the fumes, he yanked the main breaker to shut down any further meltdown. The overhead lights died. Darkness enveloped him, broken only by the station's faint emergency beacons shimmering through the forward viewport. He exhaled loudly. No turning back now. He stepped onto the docking bay's grated floor and scouted the perimeter. The station was rumored to be infested with old defense drones. On top of that, it had once been used as a xenotech experimentation lab. Black market rumors whispered about an advanced caretaker AI that might still be lurking in here. Hart had arrived with a plan: scavenge for valuable components, salvage enough to repair the Dream's jump drive, and be off this floating husk before anything weird decided to greet him. A simple job, or so he told himself, ignoring the goosebumps creeping along his arms. Cautiously, he pried open a jammed door with a crowbar, then slid inside a corridor. Thick dust swirled in the pale glow of his wrist beacon. Each step echoed. Every corner was a fresh wave of stale air and scattered debris. The signage overhead indicated labs, living quarters, cryo chambers, and an engineering deck. He decided to head for the labs first, hoping to find a power node or universal couplings. But the flicker of something bright in the distance caught his attention. It wasn't a reflection. He recognized that greenish-blue luminescence. He paused, heartbeat thudding. He'd seen some strange creatures in his time, but glowing anything usually spelled trouble. Could be radioactive contamination, could be a security drone, or something more alien. He forced Ed down a surge of anxiety and crept forward. The flicker grew stronger, and as he neared the corner, he heard a low, thrumming sound, almost a purr. He steeled himself, ready to duck back. When he carefully peeked around the bend, he saw the lab door had been forced open from the inside. Flickering overhead panels half illuminated the interior, shattered glass covered the floor. And at the center of that chaos stood a figure, tall, lithe, faintly glowing with swirling patterns across pale skin that looked almost like living marble. She was definitely not human. Feminine outlines, yes, though her proportions were elongated and her limbs tapered to delicate points. She crouched over a damaged console, rummaging through wires, and hissed in frustration. His breath caught. That had to be the rumored caretaker AI, or perhaps a living xenohybrid creation. Either way, she was mesmerizing. His eyes flicked to the partial sign near the door, something about adaptive biological intelligence. The rest was torn away. The figure turned suddenly, peering straight at him with large, luminescent eyes that rippled from blue to gold. Hart froze, crowbar still in his grip. She rose up to her full height, at least a head taller than him. The swirly G patterns along her forearms and collarbone pulsed with that same thrumming sound. "Hey," he ventured, voice cracking slightly. "I'm just..." She moved faster than he anticipated, crossing the lab in a single stride, her fingertips pressing against his chest to pin him gently against the corridor wall. The crowbar clanged to the floor. A quick, rasping sound escaped her parted lips. Before he could react, she leaned in, sniffing him. Her eyelids fluttered. Then she let out a soft, breathy laugh, almost like she was tasting the air around him. He gulped, pressing back. "Listen, lady, I come in peace." It was half a joke, half a plea. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable, yet there was a flicker of amusement in her glowing gaze. Her patterns gleamed brighter, and her voice, when it emerged, had a resonant, velvety timbre that slid over him like static electricity. You are not from here, she said, as though testing each word for shape and sound. Her accent was lilting and the corners of her lips tugged in a smirk. I am Kise. Why do you hide in the shadows? Part tried not to stare too obviously at her markings, or the supple curve of her bare midsection. She wore some sort of form-fitting suit that clung to her torso, but left portions of skin uncovered, revealing swirling lines of faintly phosphorescent color. I'm just looking for salvage, he said. Thought this place was abandoned. She stepped back, letting him breathe again, her gaze sliding over him critically. It was. I woke from stasis to find the station's inhabitants gone. They left me behind when it lost power. My protocols were corrupted. Her brow furrowed, and Hart saw a slight tremor in the glow around her wrists. Something in my code misread the designated sleep mode. Now, I am required to replicate. She pronounced the final word with a sly emphasis that made heat rush to his face. Replicate, he echoed, clearing his throat. So, that's the nest building rumor I heard about? She looked away pointedly, and the swirling pattern flared in what he guessed was embarrassment or perhaps defiance. I am an adaptive intelligence with biological capacities. My stasis was mislabeled as a breeding cycle. The system reinitialized certain subroutines that I do not fully control. She eyed him again. The protocols suggest I should locate a mate, yet I have not decided if you are suitable. Hart let out an awkward laugh. Sure, I'll just be on my way. He attempted a hasty retreat, but she caught his arm with surprising gentleness. Her skin felt cool, though the glow warmed against his touch. You cannot leave yet, she said, her voice taking on a soft urgency. The station's failsafes locked down as soon as you docked. I no longer have clearance to unlock them on my own. Her gaze flicked to the corridor behind them. We are both trapped here until we reset the main system, and given your biology, I suspect you'll be helpful, or at least interesting. He groaned inwardly. This was exactly the kind of chaotic entanglement he did not need. I guess we can help each other, provided we don't try to kill each other first. He paused, glancing down at her glowing fingers, still gripping his biceps. Mind letting me go? She released him with a teasing slowness, a faint curve to her lips. If you do not cause trouble, I will not either. Follow me. Then she pivoted, stepping gracefully over the shattered glass, leading him deeper into the lab with that rolling stride. Each step caused fresh waves of luminescence to shift across her skin, creating a hypnotic pattern that drew his eyes despite himself. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the lingering tingle where she'd touched him, and followed. Owlbar in hand, the corridor beyond the lab looked more structurally intact with fewer flickering lights. She led him to a sealed door marked Maintenance Access, tapping a series of commands on the adjacent keypad. Sparks flew from a half-exposed circuit panel. She cursed, or at least made a sound that seemed like cursing, and the suit around her torso whirred. Then she banged the panel with her fist, and the door hissed open. The abrupt release of pressure made him stagger forward, colliding with her. They both jolted, chest to back. She let out a small gasp, and the swirling glow on her neck brightened in a quick, pulsing wave. Hart inhaled sharply, taking in the strange, floral sweet scent that clung to her. He muttered an apology. She looked over her shoulder, expression both surprised and vaguely intrigued, but said nothing. Instead, she guided him down a narrow walkway lined with flickering screens. Some showed the station's blueprint, others displayed incomplete logs. Stasis chamber breach, breed mode activated, correction required. Scrolling across in half-garbled text, she pressed a few keys in an attempt to override the emergency locks. The readout spat out red warnings. System override requires offline reset for the core, she said, stepping back. She looked at Hart with eyes that gleamed a deeper gold, her tone turning abruptly amused. That means a journey to the central reactors, with every old security measure still operational. Fantastic, Hart said, forcing a grin. Even better if we have to dodge a bunch of rogue drones while we're at it. He eyed the screens, noticing new text flicker across them. Biocompatibility analysis in progress. He shot her a sidelong look. She arched an eyebrow as if daring him to comment. He decided not to push his luck. All right, lead the way, he said. He was in too deep now. If they wanted out, they needed each other, her system knowledge, his scavenging experience, and maybe more. He tried to ignore the lingering heat of her presence as she stepped past him, close enough that a tendril of her hair brushed his neck. Her alien scent coiled around his senses, and he swallowed hard. The station let out an ominous groan. He hefted the crowbar and forced himself to focus on survival, though the hum of tension between them was as real as the stale air in his lungs. If they both lived, the real trouble would only just be beginning. They ventured on, footsteps echoing in tandem, a silent, uneasy all. Ions. But with every step, Hart felt the spark between them crackle with a mix of curiosity, wariness, and something that he dared not name yet. Something that sent warmth skittering along his spine. The corridor lights flickered, revealing the nest of debris and twisted metal ahead, and somewhere beyond that lay the station's core, and hopefully a way out. Yet the biggest question still throbbed in the air between them. What did Kise truly want, and how far would her misfiring breed mode push both of them before they found an escape? He kept close watch on her shifting patterns. They glowed in the darkness like living tattoos, pulses in time with her breath. Her posture was confident, proud, and somehow predatory. She tossed him a glance over her shoulder, something sly about her expression, and he braced himself for whatever lay ahead, trying not to let the swirl of her presence scramble his thoughts. Survival first, he reminded himself sternly, though the station's gloom seemed to whisper that survival and desire might collide here in ways he never imagined. He grit his teeth and pressed on, every sense on high alert, uncertain if the station's defenses or Kise herself posed the greater threat to his heart and his life. They stepped into the next corridor, the overhead lights sparking sporadically. With a breathless hush, the station seemed to swallow them both, and Hart realized with a tight shudder that there would be no turning back from the path he was now on. He limped over twisted cables with Kise close behind him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him around a collapsed portion of the walkway. The entire place smelled like hot metal and stale air, a testament to the station's slow decay. Hart cast a wary glance at a half-burnt sign reading, "Caution, Xenobiology Lab." That was behind them now, but the place had obviously conducted experiments far beyond typical Federation regulations. Kise's existence hinted at that. Her shimmering patterns occasionally flickered from gold to purple, and her mouth set in a determined line as she scanned her surroundings. They were heading deeper into the station where the main power core should be located. According to Kise, that was the only way to reset the override. Hart's palms felt clammy. Usually, he worked alone, dealing with salvage runs, outrunning bounty hunters who wanted his hide for old debts, or talking his way out of trouble in seedy outposts. Now, the presence of this luminous alien woman unsettled him, not just because she was unpredictable, but because he couldn't stop noticing every subtle shift in her posture, every flicker of her markings. She moved like a dancer, every step sure and fluid. "Careful," she murmured, hooking an arm around his waist to pull him away from a loose floor plate. He nearly stumbled into her. She pressed her palm against his chest to steady him. This time the contact lingered. Her eyes glowed a bright, curious hue, and he felt his pulse spike in response. "Your body is generating interesting heat signatures," she observed, more clinical than seductive, though the closeness of her lips to his neck sent a jolt of awareness through him. "This environment is cold for you, yes?" Yeah," he managed, not quite trusting his voice. She was so near he could see the subtle shimmer around her pupils, as if a second eyelid or membrane pulsed there. "You're not cold?" She gave a small smile, stepping back, though her fingers trailed lightly over his chest in a way he suspected she might not even realize. "My biology self-regulates in extreme conditions," she explained, "but the environment triggers certain instincts. The system's error in my code is urging me to seek lothness." She said the last word with a sort of self-conscious twist to her lips. "If that bothers you, I can try to resist." Hart fumbled for a response. Part of him definitely didn't mind the notion of closeness, but the entire situation was so bizarre he couldn't think straight. "Don't worry about me, just let's keep moving," he said, ignoring the sudden dryness in his throat. "We're heading in the right direction, right?" Kise nodded, turning abruptly and continuing ahead. He followed, trying to stay focused on the environment, half expecting a security drone to burst from the ceiling at any moment. They passed through an area with broken stasis pods, thick glass tubes lined up in rows. Some contained cracked remains of fluid, twisted wiring, or half-formed lumps of something that made Hart's stomach lurch. "Did you know what they were doing here?" he asked in a hushed voice. She paused in front of one of the pods, brushing the dust off the glass with her fingertips. The swirling glow in her skin dimmed. "They were trying to merge an adaptive artificial intelligence with living tissue," she said quietly. "Biological matter that could be programmed and reprogrammed. I am one of their successes. Or failures. They never told me which." A faint edge of sadness hung in her tone. Hart watched her carefully. He didn't want to pry, but an unguarded bitterness flickered across her features. It reminded him she wasn't simply a curiosity. She'd likely endured captivity, forced experimentation. No wonder she was so guarded, so unpredictable. He swallowed, feeling a pang of empathy he wasn't used to. "Well, at least you're free now," he offered lamely. She glanced at him with a weary amusement. "Free, yet trapped in a station that thinks I should spawn. Ironic." Her gaze shifted to the far door. "We should go." They wound deeper down a flight of narrow steps that led to an engineering deck with half-crushed cargo containers. Broken steel beams overhead cast diagonal shadows. Dust motes glimmered in the stale air. Each step echoed hollowly. At the corridor's end, a pair of large blast doors stood closed, marked with hazard symbols. "Reactor access," Kise murmured, pointing. He approached the console beside the blast doors, tried a manual override. It beeped. "Locked," he said, half expecting that. "We need another approach, or we can force it open if we're lucky." She tapped the console as well, slender fingers dancing across the cracked screen. "There is a crawl space," she said at last. "Maintenance shaft. We can bypass the door. Follow me." The shaft she indicated was narrow enough that Hart had to suck in his gut to fit. She slithered in easily, the glow of her body illuminating the cramped tunnel. Her scent lingered, stirring something in him he couldn't quite define, like a faint electric pulse that made his heart pound. "You always this comfortable in tight spaces?" he muttered. She tossed him a look over her shoulder, her eyes gleaming mischievously. "I was designed to adapt to any environment," she said. Then her voice dropped lower, echoing in the confined metal. "But your presence, your smell, is distracting." Hart choked on an unexpected laugh. "My smell?" He was sweating from crawling in a half-destroyed ventilation shaft, so he doubted it was pleasant. She glanced at him, inhaling softly. "It resonates," she said simply. "Our body chemistries are more compatible than I expected." She paused, shifting so her face was just inches from his. "The protocols in me are urging a certain approach. I am fighting them, mostly, but they heighten my senses." Her hand brushed over his forearm, and a spark of light flickered across her skin. "You are too warm." He didn't know if that was an insult or a compliment. She was close enough that he could see the faint, iridescent specks under her cheekbones. It struck him how unearthly and captivating she was, a living puzzle. "We can talk about all that after we're out of here," he managed. "Unless your code demands you do something now?" Her lips twitched. "It demands many things," she murmured, "but I do not have to obey." Then she turned abruptly, continuing forward, leaving him blinking in the cramped darkness. He exhaled shakily, the tension felt almost tangible. The further they crawled, the more he wondered how he'd gotten himself into this predicament. Finally, the shaft opened into a wide utility room behind the reactor chamber. He crawled out, rising to his feet gingerly, crowbar clutched in one hand. Kise stood fluidly, stretching her arms overhead. "We should be able to access the main control for the reactor from here," she said. The room was lined with enormous coolant tanks, pipes, and console panels that buzzed faintly with residual power. A single wide door separated them from the reactor core. Hart stepped to the console. "All right, let's see if we can reset the station's security from here." He flicked a switch. Already the hum of old machinery trying to wake up. Then an alarm blared overhead, lights flashing red. Intruder detection perfect, he groaned. We better hurry. Kise joined him at the console, her fingertips flying over the panel. Readouts scrolled past with strings of code. She squinted, biting her lower lip. Her patterns pulsed faster, as if her frustration triggered them. It's not letting me override. The system is locked in some sort of emergency breeding protocol. This entire station is fixated on that directive. Hart stared at her. So you're telling me the station wants us to... He trailed off, an awkward flush burning in his cheeks. Its primary directive must have been to preserve my genetic line, but now it sees you as a suitable match, she said flatly, then shot him a sideways look that carried a spark of embarrassment and lingering humor. Don't get any ideas. I'm not exactly feeling romantic under these conditions. He tried a disarming grin. Wouldn't dream of it. He keyed in another sequence, ignoring the prickle of heat on his neck. We just gotta break that protocol. Then maybe we can open the blast doors and get out. A crash reverberated somewhere behind them. They both spun around to see a tattered security drone prowling through a side passage, its 3 spidery legs clacking on the metal floor. A red sensor flared, scanning them. Kise reacted first, stepping forward. The drone lifted an energy emitter with an angry buzz. Hart whipped up the crowbar, but Kise was faster, unleashing a crackling pulse from her palm that struck the drone square in its chassis. Sparks erupted and it collapsed in a heap of twisted metal. He blinked. That was impressive. She flexed her hand. I can interface with mechanical systems, disrupt them at close range, but it takes energy. She glanced warily at the corridor. We should hurry before more arrive. Hart swallowed, nodding. Together they returned to the console. Kise typed a new command, lines of alien script flooding the screen. A confirmation beep sounded. That should do a partial reset, she whispered. Then the lights overhead blinked from red to a faint yellow. The alarm faded. We'll have about 5 minutes before the station reinitializes. Then we can open the main hatch and get out of here. Assuming we can avoid the rest of the drones. A breath of relief escaped him. They had a plan. They just had to hold out for 5 minutes. But something skittered in the corridor, more footsteps or maybe mechanical limbs. And in the corner of his vision, he saw Kise's markings flicker with a new intensity. She cast him a swift glance. Stay close, she said, her voice dropping lower as the tension thickened. He nodded, stepping near her, crowbar at the ready, though she was clearly the more dangerous one. He found himself thinking that danger was part of her allure. In the flickering emergency light, her silhouette glowed, every curve traced by luminous lines that seemed to shimmer in anticipation. The station was breathing around them, each system booting and failing, glitching into new states. And at the heart of it all was Kise, caught between her own free will and the coded instincts swirling in her, compounding the confusion inside both of them. Before either could speak, the door to the reactor chamber hissed and a new series of beeps echoed, indicating a partial unlock. Kise spun around. We need to get inside the reactor control room, she murmured. Once the system reboots, we can finalize the override from in there. He moved to follow, carefully stepping over the debris. Despite the pressing danger, his mind kept snagging on the memory of her hand on his chest. The way her voice dropped when she talked about her instincts. He swallowed hard, pressing forward. The door slid open, revealing a wide chamber with the huge reactor core at its center. A ring of dim overhead lights illuminated metal walkways and a control platform in the middle. Steam hissed from vents, and an electric hum vibrated beneath the floors. The place radiated an eerie, vibrant energy. Kise led him to the central console. She bent over the controls, hair tumbling around her cheeks, luminous eyes scanning the readouts. Hart kept watch, scanning the catwalks overhead. I don't see any drones, he said softly. Kise nodded. We might have a moment of peace. She pressed a final sequence on the panel. When the reset finishes, the door locks should lift. You'll be free to go. She glanced at him then, her voice quiet. And me as well. He looked at her, feeling an odd pang. So, that's it? We bolt out of here and you go your way, I go mine? Something vulnerable flickered in her expression. I suppose so, she said softly. But then she shook her head. Though the station error might follow me, my code is altered. Unless I remove the corruption, I'll be stuck in this cycle, building a nest, seeking a mate. It's not a whim, it's a deep biological, technical imperative I can't fully turn off. If I stay aboard this station, I'll be forced to continue. If I leave, I'll carry the glitch with me. She exhaled, her glowing patterns cycling faster. I do not want to become some slave to a programming loop that demands I breed. This was not how I was meant to exist. He frowned. Maybe I can help you figure out how to fix it. But we can't do that here, right? She lifted her gaze to his, her lips parting slightly. The tension crackled back into the space between them, charged by a swirling mixture of fear, relief, and something else. You would let me stay with you? She arched a brow. You don't even know me. He forced a crooked grin. I know you knocked out a drone with your bare hands. You smell weird but not bad, and you basically saved me from permanent lock-in. That's something. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Besides, I figure 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, and I've done enough traveling alone. Her mouth quirked in a wry smile. You do not fear me? I'm too stupid to be scared, he teased, though that wasn't entirely true. He was terrified of the unknown, of the station, of how she seemed to stir up feelings in him that he talked away for a long time, but the thought of leaving her here alone or abandoning her to the mania of her forced breeding cycle gnawed at him in a way he couldn't ignore. The console beeped an update. Kise scanned it, her features tight. The reset is almost complete. We should prepare. The station might try to defend that protocol. And those security drones won't sit idle. He nodded. Let's do it. Then impulsively, he rested a hand on her shoulder, feeling the cool luminescence beneath his palm. She looked at him with a startled softness, but didn't pull away. For a moment, they stood in that hush, a crackle of unspoken attraction bridging the gap between them. Then the overhead alarms flared again, and the lights blinked from yellow back to red. Time's up, he muttered, stepping back. Kise's eyes narrowed. We face whatever comes next, she said. And her patterns flared a brighter hue. Stay close, heart. He blinked. How do you know my name? I never told you. She pressed a few final commands, speaking over her shoulder. It was in your ship's registry when you docked. I accessed it through the station's systems. I've known it since I first scented you from the corridor. That revelation sent an odd thrill. Through him, he clenched his jaw, nodding. The door behind them squealed as something hammered it from the other side. They exchanged a look of silent agreement. Then he lifted his crowbar, bracing himself, as Kise's hands glowed with a crackling energy. Together, they prepared for the onslaught that was about to break through. The station groaned around them, the hum of the reactor thrumming in their chests, and the moment felt like the precarious threshold between survival and a new, uncertain future. The blast door buckled inward with a rending shriek, sending a plume of sparks across the reactor control room's metal floor. A security drone, larger than the one before, skittered over the broken threshold on 6 segmented legs, its sensor array whirred, locking onto them. Then it unleashed a volley of bright blue plasma bolts that sizzled the air and left glowing scorch marks on the metal catwalk behind them. Hart dropped flat, a jolt of adrenaline ripping through him. Kise sprang sideways in a fluid arc. One of the blasts singed a lock of her glowing hair and she hissed angrily, returning fire with a crackling pulse from her palms. The drone staggered but kept advancing. Hart cursed under his breath, searching for nothing more than a crowbar. He spotted a rusted cargo crate labeled emergency tools, scrambled to it, pried it open. Inside, he found a battered pulse rifle. The readout said 3% charge left. Better than nothing, he growled. He slammed it against the edge of the crate to jolt it awake, then aimed at the drone's sensor cluster. He squeezed the trigger. A dull then a single bright shot tore into the drone's plating. It reeled, limbs flailing, mechanical shrieks echoing. Kise seized the opening and lunged forward, pressing her palm against the drone's carapace. Her luminous markings flared, electricity crackled, shorting out the machine's circuits. It collapsed in a smoking heap. She breathed heavily, stepping back, her eyes still glowing with that fierce light. We must hurry. The station defenses might not stop at just 1 or 2 drones. Hart nodded, glancing at the console's flickering display. Looks like the reset is done, he said, relief creeping into his voice. We can open the docking bay airlock now. Let's get out of this place. He moved to the controls, inputting the commands. The overhead lights abruptly dimmed to a more stable glow and the alarm klaxons powered down. Then an automated voice crackled over the speakers. Core systems reset complete. Breeding subroutine paused. Station lockdown disengaged. Have a productive cycle. The voice cut out, leaving a chilling echo in its wake. Kise folded her arms, her expression torn between relief and frustration. Paused, not cancelled, she muttered. She looked at Hart with a shadow of worry behind her golden eyes. I will still be dealing with the glitch, but at least we can leave. He hesitated. You're sure you want to come with me? The question felt too big, but he couldn't quite meet her gaze. He was torn between wanting her away from this station and feeling uncertain if dragging her into his ramshackle life was fair. She stepped closer, the shift of her glowing patterns indicating a mixture of determination and guarded hope. I am certain, she said. I must find a way to override these impulses or control them, and I prefer not to do it alone. Her mouth twitched in a small, tentative smile. Besides, the entire station knows your registry. You won't escape me easily. He almost laughed. Fair enough. He motioned toward the corridor. Let's gather what we can and head back to my ship. The dream can jump us to a safer place for repairs, assuming I can fix her drive. The trek back through the station was tense. They passed the remains of drones Kise had shorted out, sidestepped scattered debris. A few flickers of movement in the shadows made Hart jump, but no further attacks materialized. The station felt exhausted, as though its final spasm of defense had burned out. The occasional overhead panel sparked. Broken glass crunched underfoot. The hush felt eerie, but Hart's senses were buzzing with relief that they were still alive. When they reached the docking bay, he was greeted by the battered hull of his ship, the Wayward Dream. Sparks still hissed around the engine housing. Kise surveyed the vessel with a curious tilt of her head. This is your transport? She asked. It smells like scorched circuitry. Yeah, well, she's not pretty, but she's mine, Hart said defensively, stepping onto the lowered ramp. And we'd better hope she still flies. I need to patch the jump drive. He gestured for Kise to follow. She did, her gaze roaming over the cramped cargo hold. Once aboard, he activated the interior lights. Faint though they were, the Dream had enough power to run basic life support. He felt a jolt of shame at the exposed wires in the cockpit, the cracked seats, the battered instrumentation. Hardly the environment for a luminous alien woman with advanced abilities. But Kise seemed more intrigued than disgusted. She trailed a finger along a console, analyzing the layout. Her swirling markings cast dancing shadows across the bulkheads. Hart rummaged in a storage locker for tools. He found a coil of wire, a set of micro-welders. I'm going to realign the jump coils. Should only take a few minutes if we don't want a blowout. He hesitated, glancing at her. In the meantime, you can, explore or take a seat? She offered a small, wry grin. I will look around. She slipped past him, close enough that he felt the whisper of her body heat. He couldn't help watching as she moved along the corridor, studying every detail of his cramped living space. He took a breath, forcing his attention back to the engine. The jump drive was lodged behind a panel in the cockpit. He pried it open, wincing at the charred coils inside. You cursed hunk of junk, he muttered, carefully extracting a damaged circuit board. If he could splice it with an auxiliary cable, they might manage a short-range jump. While he worked, the background noise of the station's docking bay felt ominously quiet, but at least no new alarms were blaring. He heard her footsteps returning. She crouched beside him, observing with a thoughtful expression. I can help, she said. I can interface with technology more directly than you. May I? Hart paused, stepping aside. Be my guest. Kise placed her fingertips against the jump drive's main circuit assembly. A faint hum emanated from her, and her markings glowed, traveling in subtle pulses from her shoulders down her arms. The coil of wires lit up in response, flickering as though being tested by her unique bioelectric field. "This is badly damaged," she murmured, "but I think I can stabilize it temporarily." Her eyes fluttered shut in concentration. A swirl of colored light danced across her skin, weaving into the wiring. Hart found himself transfixed, momentarily forgetting to breathe. Then she released the circuit with a soft exhale, looking up at him. "Try it now." He hit the power toggle. The jump drive flickered to life with an angry whir, then stabilized into a steady hum. The readout on the console scrolled. Drive status, 46% functional. That was enough to get them out of here. He let out a surprised laugh. "Well, color me impressed," he said. "We'll be able to manage at least a short jump to the near as safe harbor. After that, I'll see if there's a station that can do more thorough repairs." She nodded, her gaze wandering the cockpit, taking in the overhead compartments, the walls plastered with old star charts. "We should leave now before the station changes its mind about letting us go." He agreed. Taking a seat in the pilot's chair, he powered up the Dream's engines. Kise slid into the co-pilot seat, eyeing the readouts. The overhead thrusters groaned, but slowly they rose off the deck. The station's docking bay doors began to open, revealing the star-dotted expanse of deep space beyond. Hart felt a surge of relief as they drifted free of the station's interior, the battered Dream responding to his controls. The moment they cleared the docking perimeter, he punched in the jump coordinates for a system about 2 parsecs away, a neutral zone where they might hide out for a bit. The warp field crackled around them. The Dream shook, metal plating rattling ominously, but the drive held. Stars elongated into bright lines, and with a final jolt, they leapt into the swirling kaleidoscope of faster-than-light transit. Hart exhaled, slumping in his seat. "We made it," he breathed. "Holy..." He broke off, letting out a half-deep, delirious laugh. Kise gazed out the viewport at the shimmering lights of hyperspace. Her expression was rapt, as though seeing something wondrous for the first time. "So, this is what it's like," she whispered. Then her eyes turned to him and her lips curved in a slow, uncertain smile. "Thank you for not leaving me there." He swallowed. "Sure," he said, voice rougher than he intended. "Couldn't just bail on you, that'd be rude." She chuckled softly, then went quiet. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, the hum of the engines their only soundtrack. Eventually, he powered down the jump stabilizers to let the autopilot handle the short hop. "We've got a few hours until we drop out of FTL," he said. "The living quarters are cramped, but there's a bunk if you want to rest. I'm going to patch a couple more things." Kise stood, gazing at him with an unreadable intensity. "I will explore," she said again. "Get a sense of my new environment." She paused before leaving the cockpit. "Hart, I sense your tension. Are you uneasy with me here?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "No, it's just not every day I pick up a luminous alien from a derelict station that tried to breed us." He forced a crooked smile. "I'm out of my element." She studied him for a long moment. "I appreciate your honesty," she murmured. Then, with a tilt of her head, she turned and walked out, her faint glow casting strange patterns on the corridor walls. He watched her go, exhaling sharply when she disappeared. His head spun with the events of the last hour. He'd gone to scavenge parts and ended up with a living xeno-intelligence who now stood in his ship's corridor, grappling with a glitch that demanded nesting and mating. He tried not to think too hard about what that might mean. Instead, he busied himself with checking the Dream's various systems, ignoring the swirl of desire, curiosity, and apprehension that churned in his gut. He was safe from the station for the moment, but a new tension brewed inside the battered walls of his ship, and he couldn't deny the flicker of excitement that came with it. He found her in the cargo hold a few minutes later, picking up a stray coil of wire from a pile of scrap. She stared at it intently, as though analyzing its structure. When he approached, she lifted her gaze, the markings on her cheeks glowing softly. "You keep many random parts," she observed, splaying her hand over the scattered electronics. He shrugged. "I salva. GG, never know what might come in handy." Honestly, though, it's mostly junk. He knelt by her, sorting through an old fuse array. His shoulder brushed hers, and he felt that spark again, a fleeting jolt of warmth. You, finding everything all right? The bunk's back that way if you want to. Before he could finish, she touched his arm with a slow deliberateness that made his breath catch. I can sense your pulse quickening when I'm close, she said softly, her voice curious rather than accusatory. You are not alarmed, but uncertain. Her gaze roamed over his face, searching. He set down the fuse array, meeting her glowing eyes. The swirling patterns across her collarbone radiated a gentle, pulsing light. Yeah, he admitted. I'm not used to, well, any of this. You're gorgeous, and I'm just some guy scraping by on a half-broken ship. I'm... She moved closer, her fingers sliding along his jawline in a gesture that was unexpectedly tender. He forgot what he was saying. Her skin was cool, but it made his own warmth more pronounced. You freed me, she said. I do not see you as just some guy. A small smile touched her lips, an earnest warmth. We share a bond already in escaping that place. He swallowed harta. Murring. That's one word for it. The tension surged anew between them. He cleared his throat. Though you did mention the station's systems pushing you to find a partner. Don't mistake that for real interest, or you might... She cut him off with a firm, though not unkind, press of her finger to his lips. I am more than a glitch, she said quietly. I can sense desire that is not forced. I do not want to trap you, but I do want to... Her expression flickered with vulnerability. I want to be near you. It feels less lonely. He realized his heart was pounding so loud he could hear it. His mouth was dry. Slowly, he lifted a hand to rest against hers where it cupped his cheek. He could feel the subtle tremor in her. You're not alone, he said softly, each word a half-whisper. He leaned in, not sure if it was wise, but feeling compelled by a gravity he couldn't resist. Their foreheads nearly touched, his breath mingling with hers. Her eyes drifted shut, and he nearly closed the gap when suddenly a high-pitched beeping from the cockpit made them both jump. He cursed under his breath, pulling away. The beep sounded urgent, probably the Dream's nav system complaining about an imminent reversion from FTL. Sorry, he muttered. DT calls. She exhaled, and for a moment he thought he saw disappointment flash in her luminous eyes. Then her expression shifted back to calm neutrality. Yes, we should address that, she agreed, voice carefully composed. Hart scrambled upright, scurrying to the cockpit. Sure enough, the nav system displayed that their short-range jump was about to end. Some gravitational anomaly required them to drop out of FTL earlier than planned. Brace yourself, he warned Kise, who had followed him in. It might be rough. The Dream lurched as real space reasserted itself. Stars snapped back into their usual pinpoints, and they found themselves drifting in the empty black, far from any immediate planetary body. The console beeped a caution. Engine temperature elevated, hull integrity compromised. He scowled. We can't push her any further. We'll have to do repairs here in the middle of nowhere until the drive cools. Kise peered at the readouts. We have enough resources for the repairs? He shrugged. Let's hope. He pivoted in his seat to face her, the overhead lights casting half shadows on her face. Look, we'll be stuck here a while, so might as well get comfortable. She hesitated, crossing her arms as though guarding herself again. I will help however I can, but I do feel the station's glit stirring. She paused, cheeks flushing with an iridescent shimmer. It is like an instinct, prompting me to create a nest. My mind says it's nonsensical, but my body... She trailed off, her voice trembling slightly. Hart took a steadying breath, ignoring the wild jump in his pulse. We'll figure it out, he said, though his tone held a certain wryness. Maybe we can route that subroutine out of your system or something. She gave him a grateful, weary nod, then she touched his shoulder lightly. Thank you. He mustered a smile, forcing away the swirl of conflicting emotions. Any time, he said. Then he hauled himself out of the pilot's chair. I'll go see if I can patch up the external plating from inside the hull. Care to help? She agreed, and they spent the next hour working side by side, splicing cables and sealing cracks. Occasionally, their hands brushed, and each time he felt that jolt, that simmer of something unspoken. She'd glance at him with those luminous eyes, and his heart would flutter. If this was a dream, it was the strangest he'd ever had, but it was real, and beneath the swirl of tension was a current of genuine curiosity, maybe even trust beginning to grow between them. Finally, they settled in the ship's cramped living space, exhausted. Hart rummaged through a supply locker and tossed her a sealed ration pack. She sniffed it suspiciously. "It's not gourmet," he warned with a grin, "but it'll keep you alive." She opened it carefully, wrinkling her nose at the processed food bar inside. He bit into one himself, grimacing at the chalky taste. They chewed in silence for a while. Then Kise spoke softly. "My system might not need much food, but it helps to try." She forced a small bite, swallowing it with difficulty. "I see why you call this junk." "Hey, it's an acquired taste," he tried to lighten the mood, but her expression remained thoughtful. She was gazing at him steadily. Something in her eyes reminded him that no matter how human her silhouette seemed, she was still an alien intelligence, reading him in ways he probably couldn't imagine. He cleared his throat. "So, about that glitch, are you going to be okay?" She set the ration aside. "I don't know, sometimes I feel a compulsion to gather materials, to prepare a space, like I want to entangle our genetic codes, but I also feel free in moments. It's conflicting." She looked at him almost shyly. "I think closeness helps me maintain control, but I don't want to impose." Her vulnerability took him off guard. He sighed, scooting closer, ignoring the frantic flutter in his own chest. "You're not imposing," he said softly. "I mean, we have to make do in this tiny ship anyway. If you need closeness or comfort, I'm here. God knows I'm no shining example of a stable human, but maybe that's what makes us a good team." He offered a small, awkward grin. She exhaled, her tension visibly easing. Without speaking, she leaned in, resting her forehead against his shoulder. He went still, but then slowly let his arm circle around her, feeling her slight weight against him. Her hair smelled faintly like ozone and something floral. Her luminous markings glowed softly where her skin touched his, and it sent a gentle warmth through his body. This wasn't exactly how he'd planned his day, but in that moment, with the hum of the dream's life support in the background, it felt oddly right. They stayed like that for a time, sharing the simple comfort of contact. He could sense her calming, her breathing growing steadier. His own heart thumped at a calmer pace. Slowly, she pulled back, meeting his eyes. "Thank you," she murmured. Then her hand lifted to trace the line of his jaw, a slow, deliberate caress. His breath caught and he felt the tension flicker again, stronger this time. She studied his face. "I want to know you better." He swallowed, unsure if it was wise to let desire override caution. Yet he found himself drawn into her luminous eyes, the swirl of colors that hinted at her every emotion. Gently, he slid his fingers up her forearm, noticing the goosebumps that rose on her skin. "I want that too," he admitted. Her lips parted slightly, as if an invisible thread was tugging them closer. But before that thread could fully pull taut, a sudden clang echoed from the corridor. He jerked, startled. Something had toppled over in the cargo bay. The moment shattered. "Stay here," he whispered, rising to his feet and grabbing the crowbar again. A wave of adrenaline surged in his veins. If something had followed them out of that station, or if a stowaway drone had latched onto the hull, they could be in real trouble. Kise stood as well, not waiting for him to decide. She followed, luminous patterns flickering in readiness. They crept toward the cargo hold, the overhead light flickering. Another clang rang out, followed by a scattering of metal. Heart tensed. "We're armed," he called out. "Show yourself." A moment of silence. Then, from behind a crate, something metallic scuttled into view. Hart lifted the crowbar, but then realized it was not a drone or a threat. It was a small maintenance bot, battered and flickering, must have come along with the salvage from some old job. The poor thing was half sparking from its side. Kaylis exhaled in relief. It's damaged, probably malfunctioning, she said softly, stepping forward. The small bot tried to flee, but she crouched, holding a hand out. A faint swirl of light passed from her fingers to the bot, and it went still, beeped once, and shut down. Part lowered the crowbar, letting out a breath of laughter. Damn thing scared me half to death. The tension ebbed away, leaving behind a shaky relief. He offered Kaylis a hand, helping her rise. Their eyes met, and they shared a quick, almost shy smile. "False alarm," she murmured, "but if you keep all sorts of junk on board, I suspect we'll have more surprises." He snorted. "That's the joy of living free, you never know what you'll dig up." Then, as they turned off the light in the hold, he guided her back to the living area, struggling to regain the half-lost mom. Of closeness they'd had, but the moment once broken was no longer as simple to reclaim. They sat down, a comfortable foot of space between them now. Kalisa's expression was thoughtful, as though she'd retreated into her own mind. Her glow had softened, the swirling lines along her collarbones dim. Hart shifted, wanting to say something to bridge the gap, but the words felt stuck in his throat. Eventually, he sighed. "We should probably rest, like I said. It's been a day." She nodded slowly. "Yes. Let me see your sleeping quarters." Art tried to ignore the jolt of excitement and apprehension those words triggered. He led her to the small bunk built into the corridor wall. It barely fit one person comfortably, let alone two. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not exactly 5-star. She ran her palm over the narrow mattress, then turned to face him, luminous eyes gleaming in the dim overhead light. "I have never slept in a bed, I think. My stasis pod was my only experience." Her lips curved faintly. "This will be new." He swallowed. "Well, you're welcome to it. I've got some blankets I can roll out on the floor. It's not—" She reached for his hand. "Stay with me," she said quietly, then added, "if that is all." "Right." His heart skipped. "You're sure?" She nodded, though there was a tremor in the glow around her shoulders. "I do not wish to be alone, but also, I like your warmth." Her tone was matter-of-fact, yet laced with an undercurrent of something more. Hart hesitated only a moment before exhaling a wry chuckle. "All right, scoot over, 'cause it's a tight fit." He slid in beside her, the bunk creaking ominously. Their bodies pressed close by necessity, her cool limbs tangling with his. The contact was jolting, intimate. He felt her breath catch, and she looked up at him, her face inches from his. In that closeness, he could see the silver flecks in her eyes, the subtle pulse of color in the lines across her cheeks. "Is this acceptable?" she whispered, as though half expecting him to bolt. "It's fine," he murmured, the heat of his cheeks betraying his nerves. He draped an arm around her waist, feeling her shift to accommodate. The ship lights were dimming automatically, leaving them in a hushed darkness broken only by her faint bioluminescence. They lay there, hearts pounding in unison. He could sense her tension melting into a different kind of tension, one that pulsed with possibility. She nestled against him, the swirl of her patterns tracing over his skin where she touched him. He sucked in a soft breath, a sudden heady rush tangling with his exhaustion. Her voice was a bare murmur near his ear. "My system is calmer when you're near," she said. "I don't feel that frantic urge to gather or—" She pressed her forehead against his neck. "I just feel safe." He closed his eyes, letting the closeness envelop them. Safe. That was the word he'd never used to describe his life, constantly scraping by, always on the run. But right now, lying in this cramped bunk with a luminous alien who'd chosen to stay with him, he felt safer than he had in years. "Get some rest," he managed, pulling a thin blanket over them. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." She didn't reply, only let out a soft hum that reverberated through her chest. He felt the vibrations echo in his own body, surprisingly soothing. The hum lulled him, and after a few moments the day's exhaustion won out, the swirl of confusion, attraction, and relief surrendered to sleep, and he drifted off in the glow of her presence, uncertain yet strangely hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The next morning, if there was such a thing as morning in deep space, he awoke to the gentle hum of life, support, and the softness of Kise pressed against him. For a brief, disoriented moment, he wondered if it was all a dream. Then her hand shifted on his chest, and the swirl of luminescence on her arm caught his eye. He blinked into wakefulness, heart pounding at the surreal reality. She stirred, eyelids fluttering open. A soft, curious smile crossed her lips when she saw him. "You remained," she murmured, as though she half expected him to vanish in the night. He smiled back, a little sheepish. "I'm not that quick to run," he teased. Carefully, he extricated himself from the bunk, stretching his stiff muscles. "Gotta check the engines, see if the drive's cooled enough for us to move on." Kise sat up, her hair falling around her shoulders, the glow of her markings gently pulsing. "I will assist," she said. "I can stabilize the drive further if needed." They worked in tandem again, him operating the manual controls while she used her bioelectric abilities to monitor the engine temperature. The readouts improved steadily under her influence, and soon the Dream's console showed green across most systems. "We could jump again, find a proper port for real repairs," he said, scanning the star charts. "There's an outpost about off a parsec away. It's small, but we might find a mechanic and some parts." Kise nodded. "Yes, and perhaps resources to research ways to fix my glitch, or at least keep it from overrunning my will." She paused, biting her lip. "I feel it stirring again, that nest-building impulse, not as strong as before, but present." She gave him a fleeting, apologetic look. Hart squeezed her shoulder gently. "We'll figure it out," he repeated, trying to lend some confidence he wasn't entirely sure he had. "Besides, maybe that outpost has some black market tech experts. They've seen everything." She relaxed slightly under his hand. "Then let us go. I want to see more of this galaxy than a cage and a broken station." He sat at the pilot's seat while she settled beside him at the co-pilot's station. With a flick of switches, he engaged the sublight engines, guiding them away from the emptiness they'd sheltered in. Then, once they had a safe trajectory, Kise tapped in a short jump sequence, her glowing fingertips dancing over the keys in a way that put his attempts at programming to shame. The hyperdrive roared to life, and they shot into the swirling corridor of faster-than-light, leaving behind the lonely patch of space. An hour later, they emerged near the outpost. A small planetoid, ringed by a battered space station with flickering docking lights, came into view. Hart scanned the frequencies. "Outpost calls itself Trace Station," he said, reading the metadata. "Mostly a pit stop for traders, a few shops, minimal law enforcement." Kalise's lips curved slightly. "Your kind of place, I assume?" He chuckled. "Let's hope so." He transmitted a docking request, receiving a half-garbled permission slip. With careful maneuvering, he slotted the Dream into one of the outpost's external berths. The docking clamps hissed, sealing them in place. The corridor connecting to the station looked old, with mismatched plating and flickering overhead lights. Hart felt a wave of familiarity. He'd been to plenty of dingy outposts like this, but something told him this trip would be different. For one, he had a luminous alien companion with him, and that was bound to turn a few heads. He turned to Kise. "Ready?" She studied the worn corridor through the small viewport. "I am curious, and also a bit apprehensive." She glanced at him. "Will they react badly to me?" "Possibly," he admitted, "but you're with me, and I've got a knack for smoothing out first impressions. Well, sometimes." He flashed a grin. "Worst case, we short-circuit them and run, but let's try to keep it civil." She nodded, agreed. Then, with a steadying breath, she followed him into the airlock. The station interior was everything Hart expected: dingy corridors lined with patched metal, the smell of stale air mixed with engine grease, flickering neon signs in various alien scripts, and a handful of traders hawking their wares from stalls. Workers in threadbare uniforms trudged by, not sparing them more than a cursory glance. It seemed the outpost was used to seeing all manner of beings pass through. Kalise's luminescence attracted some stares, but no one openly challenged them. They made their way to a small engineering kiosk that displayed a faded sign, Max's Mechanics. We fix it or scrap it. Inside, a stout four-armed alien rummaged through a crate of parts. He turned, revealing a wrinkled face that reminded Hart of a bulldog. "Yeah," the alien growled. "What do you want?" Hart cleared his throat. "Got a battered jump drive that needs more than a patch job. You got the gear for a T-46 coil refurbishment?" The mechanic eyed Hart, then shifted his gaze to Kise with obvious curiosity. She stood calmly, letting him stare. "Maybe," he grunted at last. "Depends what you're paying." Hart forced a grin. "I've got some salvage, tech modules I picked up in an old lab. Might be worth something." The alien's beady eyes glittered with interest. "Show me." They spent the next half hour haggling. Kise mostly watched, letting Hart handle negotiations. Eventually, they struck a deal for the coil refurbishment, plus some fresh plating to patch the Dream's hull. The alien mechanic said he'd need a day to get everything. Hart paid a deposit, leaving them with minimal credits. He rubbed his chin, remembering how lean his finances had become. Once outside the kiosk, Kise touched his arm gently. "Are you all right?" Kise. God, forcing a smile. "Just low on funds, that's normal." He tried to sound cavalier. "Anyway, we have to wait here a day. Might as well see what else we can find, maybe a data broker who can help with your code." She nodded, though he felt her studying him in that intent way again, as if seeing emotions he tried to hide. He attempted to lighten the mood, gesturing toward a neon-lit corridor. "That way leads to the market level. We might find a broker there." As they walked, Kise stayed close, occasionally brushing her hand against his. The contact felt both casual and electric. Hart couldn't help noticing the stares from passers-by, but he ignored them. The market level was loud, bustling with a mix of species. Vendors shouted about contraband, exotic foods, and questionable services. Holo signs flickered overhead, advertising everything from black market enhancements to pleasure huts. They stopped at a kiosk run by a tall, robed figure whose face remained hidden behind a tinted visor. A sign overhead said Data Solutions. That was promising enough for Hart. "Excuse me," he said, clearing his throat. "We're looking for help with an AI subroutine glitch. Know anyone who could handle that?" The robed figure turned slow. "Lee, we handle data," came a distorted voice, "AI or otherwise. What is your price range?" Hart paused. He had basically no credits left after the mechanic deposit. I can barter high-quality salvage from an old Federation lab." The figure was silent for a moment, then reached out a slender hand. "Show me." Hart fumbled out a small data chip he'd extracted from the station's console. Some leftover logs or schematics, he wasn't entirely sure. He'd been saving it in case it was valuable. "It's partial, but might have research data," he said. The robed individual took the chip, inserted it into a slot on the kiosk, scanned. A soft hum filled the air. Kise shifted slightly as though uneasy. The figure finally spoke. "This data is incomplete but interesting, possibly worth a basic override script. I can transfer instructions on how to isolate the sub." Hart glanced at Kise, hopeful. She gave him a minute shrug, then stepped forward. "Deal," she said firmly. "Give us the script." The figure tapped a console, then slid a small disk across the counter. "Apply this code to the AI's main matrix, run the isolation, but I offer no guarantee. If the subroutine has deep integration, it may require more advanced solutions. Take it or leave it." They took it. As they walked away, Hart turned the disk over in his hand. "We can try it on the ship," he said. "Might at least lessen the glitch." Bowie's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "That is enough for now, thank you." She looked at him, her glow warming. "I am grateful, Hart, for everything." He felt a surge of warmth in response. "Hey, we're in this together now, right?" He offered a small smile. "I'd say let's celebrate if we had more credits, but how about we find somewhere quiet, see if we can run this code?" She agreed, so they found an abandoned corner of the station, an old lounge area with broken seats, strobing neon overhead. Hardly luxurious, but it was secluded. Kise settled into a seat, hooking the disc up to a small portable terminal Hart carried. She closed her eyes, placing her fingertips on the terminal's exposed circuitry. I can bridge the code manually, she murmured. Stand by me in case something goes wrong. Hart hovered close, heart drumming. She inhaled, and her body went still. Her markings began to pulse in a rhythmic sequence. Lines of code scrolled across the terminal's tiny screen. She frowned, lips parting, a faint trembling spreading through her frame. He gripped her shoulder. You okay? Fighting it, she whispered, voice tight. The Nest protocol is resisting. It's strong. Her entire form tensed, that swirling glow intensifying. Her eyes squeezed shut, sweat beading on her brow. Hart's gut twisted. He could only watch. A full minute passed, the tension radiating from her in waves. Then her markings dimmed slightly, and she sagged forward, gasping. He knelt beside her, steadying her with an arm around her waist. Kise? She blinked, her gaze refocusing. Her breath came hard and fast. It's quieter, she murmured. I can still sense it, but it feels dulled. A shaky exhale. I think the code is helping. Relief crashed through him. He pulled her close, ignoring the setting around them. That's good, he breathed. You sure you're okay? Her arms slipped around his shoulders. She nodded, pressing her face into his neck for a moment. The closeness sent a rush of warmth through him. I am better, she whispered. Then she lifted her head, and the look in her eyes was intense, vulnerable, yet somehow free of that frantic edge. Thank you. Hart swallowed, heart pounding at the contact. Their surroundings melted away, the noise of the station a distant murmur. He brushed a strand of her hair aside, fingertips trailing across her cheek. For a moment, he thought she might lean in for a kiss, but then footsteps clanged on the metal floor behind them and they jerked apart. A pair of station workers strolled by, giving them curious side eyes. Hart cleared his throat, standing up quickly, offering Kise a hand. She took it, rising gracefully. Let's head back to the dream, he murmured. She nodded and they left, navigating the station's corridors with renewed purpose. Neither spoke much, but the current of awareness between them felt stronger than before. The impulse from the glitch might be muted, yet the attraction now was undeniably their own. They returned to find the mechanic had begun preliminary work on the jump drive coil. He said it would take at least 12 hours. So they had time to kill. Hart let out a resigned sigh. Guess we camp out in the ship or find some corner of the station to sleep. Kise turned to him, a teasing glimmer in her eyes. I prefer the ship, less gawking from strangers. He chuckled. Yeah, that's fair. Once aboard, they realized just how cramped everything felt with the tools and half-removed engine parts scattered about. Kise gave him an amused, exasperated look. You live in chaos. He shrugged, returning her wry smile. Chaos and I have an ongoing relationship, sorry. Then he set about clearing space in the living area, piling scrap into corners so they had at least a small square to sit. He noticed her expression soften when he took the time to tidy for her comfort. A hush settled as they both realized they were alone again, no immediate tasks demanding their attention. She approached him slowly, luminous eyes simmering with that quietly intense light. Hart, she said, voice low, I want to understand more about us. About closeness that is not forced by protocol. Her steps brought her within arm's reach, and she paused, gazing up at him. His heart hammered. Yeah, me too, he managed, rubbing his palm on his pant leg nervously. I'm not the best at relationships. Usually I skip town before anyone gets close. Her lips curved. I have never had a relationship at all, so we are equally inexperienced. She hesitated, then slid her hands around his waist. The simple embrace felt electric, the heat of their bodies melding. Her face tilted toward his, luminous patterns rippling along her arms. But I want to try. He swallowed, a wave of heady anticipation washing over him. Gently he bent his head, brushing his lips against hers. Her mouth parted in a soft intake of breath, and then she responded, hesitant yet hungry, the glow on her skin pulsing in time with his pounding heart. The kiss tasted of shared fear and newfound wonder, a hesitant exploration that quickly deepened as she pressed closer, fingers curling into his shirt. A soft sound escaped her throat, and he angled his head for better contact, the tension they'd been dancing around finally finding release. The rush of sensation was dizzying, her cool lips, the slight static prickle of her glowing skin. His arms tightened around her, pulling her flesh against his chest. Her body felt simultaneously firm and supple, shaped by an alien physiology that responded in ways he hadn't experienced before. The swirl of her markings brightened wherever they touched, as though reflecting the intensity of her emotions. It broke apart for air, both breathing hard. She studied his face, cheeks flushed with iridescent color. That was... She trailed off, words failing her. He managed a shaky grin. Yeah, I know, me too. He stroked a hand along her jaw, marveling at the subtle texture of her skin, the faint hum that seemed to vibrate under her surface. Desire swelled in him, tempered by caution. We can slow down, if you want. Her gaze flickered with amusement. I have been waiting for experiences beyond a lab. Slowing down is not exactly what I want. Her voice held a teasing note, surprising him. She leaned in, capturing his mouth again in a more confident kiss, parting his lips with a soft insistence. A ragged sound escaped him. He let himself sink into the sensations, the electric brush of her tongue, the gentle scrape of nails at the nape of his neck. She pressed him backward until his back bumped the bulkhead. The swirl of her glowing tattoos made him feel as if they were entwined in living light. This wasn't forced, he realized. It wasn't the glitch. This was real, an attraction that had grown in the cracks of fear and survival. He cupped her cheeks, returning her kisses with mounting urgency. She arched into him, a soft moan vibrating against his lips. The rest of the universe felt distant, overshadowed by the press of her body and the fluttering in his chest. When the moment threatened to spin out of control, she pulled back, panting softly. Her eyes gleamed, pupils dilated. We can move to the bunk, she suggested, half laughing at the ridiculousness of the cramped space. Unless you prefer a pile of scrap metal. He let out a breathless chuckle. Bed sounds good. They stumbled together, hands roving, hearts pounding. The bunk was just as cramped as before, but they didn't care, tangling in the blankets as if the smallness forced them even closer. Her lips found his neck, trailing kisses that sent sparks down his spine. He responded by exploring the delicate lines of her collarbones, pressing his mouth to the glowing patterns and eliciting a gasping sigh from her. Each new touch felt like a discovery, her alien physiology responding with subtle shifts in luminescence, small vibrations. Time blurred. Their desire built in waves, breath hitching in startled pleasure. But it wasn't purely physical. He felt the emotional current, a sense of trust forging between them. They moved in a clumsy, urgent dance, still learning each other's rhythms. Her nails bit into his shoulders as she drew him closer, her voice a whisper of his name, filled with longing. He murmured reassurances, scattering kisses along her glowing skin. For once in his life, Hart didn't think about the next job or the next run. He was here, present in this moment. When they finally found a peak of joined sensation, it was intense and startling, leaving them breathless, arms wound tightly around each other. Her glow pulsed in a gentle wave, a reflection of the quivering aftermath that left them both trembling. Afterward, they lay entangled, her head on his chest. She traced slow circles on his skin, the luminescence trailing after her fingertips. He stroked her hair, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. Something deeper than mere satisfaction. The glitch no longer seemed to hold the same frantic power. This was something else entirely. She sighed contentedly. I feel calm, she murmured. No urges to gather or build, just a sense of closeness. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. I'm glad, he whispered, surprised by the gentle tone in his own voice. I am too. Silence enveloped them, comfortable and warm. Outside, the station's hum continued, but in their small universe it barely registered. He found his eyes growing heavy, lulled by her presence. The day's chaos had drained him. She seemed content to rest as well, her breathing soft and steady against his ribs. Gradually, They drifted into sleep, wrapped in each other's arms. When Hart woke later, he found Kise already up, sitting cross-legged on the bunk beside him with a thoughtful expression. She'd pulled on a loose shirt of his which looked incongruous with her glowing tattoos. "Hey," he murmured, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She glanced at him, offering a soft smile. "Rest well?" He stretched, feeling pleasantly sore. "Yeah, actually," he admitted. Then he frowned at her anxious expression. "What's on your mind?" She sighed, fingers tracing a swirl on her arm. "The station's subroutine is calmer but not gone. I can feel it in the background. I fear it may resurface if triggered. What if I lose control again?" He sat up, taking her hand gently. "We'll figure something out," he said. "We got that partial override code. Maybe we can refine it or find someone more skilled to help. We're not alone in this." She studied him, then leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, relief flickering in her glowing eyes. Then she stood, offering him a hand. "Come, let's see if the mechanic has made progress." They dressed Kise in the form-fitting suit she'd worn on the station, plus a spare jacket of Hart's to blend in a little more. Then they headed back out to the station corridors. The hustle and bustle hadn't slowed. N.D. Hart felt a strange contentment walking beside her. She wasn't clinging or uncertain. She moved with confident grace, though she did occasionally slip her hand into his, as if seeking that reassuring contact. Each time he felt her cool fingers intertwine with his, a spark of warmth threaded through him. At the mechanic's kiosk, the stout alien gave them an unimpressed grunt. "Drive coil's done," he said. "I want the rest of my payment before you take it." Hart fished out the salvage he'd promised, watching the mechanic inspect each piece. Satisfied, the alien took them to a side garage where the Dream's coil had been placed on a hover cart. "Installation is on you. I ain't climbing into that hunk of junk you call a ship," he grumbled. "Fair enough," Hart said dryly. He set about loading the coil onto a small dolly, preparing to move it back to the docking bay. Kise helped, easily lifting half the coil that Hart struggled with. He couldn't help but grin at her strength. She smirked, ignoring the mechanic's curious stare. They hauled the coil back to the Dream, installed it with minimal fuss, and then Hart spent another hour running diagnostics. Everything came back green. He powered up the engine in a test run, and the Hume was steady, no ominous rattles. This was the best shape the Dream had been in for a while. He turned to Kise, who was watching from the cockpit doorway. "We're good," he announced, a grin creasing his face. "We can leave whenever." She returned his smile, stepping close. "Then let's find somewhere else, a place we can investigate my condition further, or simply explore." Her eyes lit with a quiet excitement. "I don't want to hide in stations and labs anymore. I want to see the stars with you." Hart's heart twisted with a rush of warmth he hadn't expected. He reached out, tugging her gently closer. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'd like that." They stood there, the hum of the repaired engine thrumming through the deck plating and a sense of new possibility opening up before them. They sealed the airlock, paid the docking fees with the last of his credits, and slipped back into space. This time, the jump was smooth, the Dream responding eagerly to the fresh coil. Hart guided them away from the outpost, deeper into uncharted territory. He had no exact destination in mind, only that they'd keep moving until they found a place that felt right, a place where Kise could continue unraveling her own design, and where maybe he could figure out how to let someone in for once. She watched the stars streak past in the viewport, her glowing patterns shifting in soft waves. "Where to?" she asked, looking at him with eyes that hinted at infinite curiosity. He shrugged, a slow smile spreading. "Anywhere we want. The galaxy's huge, and we've got time to kill." He reached over, resting a hand on her knee. She covered his hand with hers, weaving their fingers together. Neither said anything more. The swirl of light outside the cockpit seemed to mirror the quiet swirl of emotion between them. When they dropped out of FTL near a swirling gas giant, Hart let the Dream coast. They drifted, watching the planet's dazzling bands of color swirl in its atmosphere. Kise stared, entranced. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He glanced at her, marveling at how the shifting glow on her cheekbones seemed to reflect the mesmerizing planet's colors. Yeah, he said, equally captivated by her. It is. She caught his gaze, cheeks coloring faintly. Then she laughed, a soft, exhilarated sound. I feel free, she confessed, leaning back in the co-pilot seat, but also a little terrified. I don't know what tomorrow brings. Hart nodded, resting an arm over the back of his seat. That's the thrill of it. We figure it out as we go. He paused, searching for the right words. I want you here, Kise, not just because we ran from that station together. I like having you around. His typical bravado faltered, revealing an unguarded sincerity. Her expression softened and she rose from her seat, slipping into his lap with easy grace. He let out a soft huff, adjusting to her weight. She cradled his face in her hands, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. Then I will stay, she murmured, the glow on her skin brightening like a quiet sunrise. At least, until you get tired of me? He snorted. That might take a while. Wrapping his arms around her waist, he returned her kiss with a slow, unhurried tenderness, the swirl of the cosmos around them setting the stage for something that felt both brand new and strangely fated. They lingered there, sharing soft laughter and unspoken promises, letting the dream drift near the gas giant's brilliance. The future was uncertain, but that uncertainty felt more like hope than dread. In that moment, with her luminous presence curled against him and the hume of the ship steady under their feet, Hart realized he wasn't just running anymore. He was finally moving forward. Together with Kise, and it felt like the start of something wondrous and wholly unexpected. As the planet's swirling clouds glimmered in the viewport, they settled into a comfortable hush, hearts beating in sync, bodies entwined. The thrumming of the dream's engine matched the quiet pulse of Kise's glow, and Hart let out a long, contented breath. Whatever lay ahead, glitch or no glitch, danger or no danger, he knew they'd face it side by side. He eventually coaxed the dream away from the gas giant's orbit, plotting a course to a more populated region where they might find a data specialist. Kise remained perched beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The swirl of her tattoos reflected the gentle excitement coursing through both of them. In the next sector, they encountered a communication beacon broadcasting an automated distress signal. Hart glanced at Kise, who raised an inquisitive brow. Might be worth checking out, he said. Could be a salvage op, or maybe someone needs help. She nodded, shifting in her seat. Let's see what it is. The signal led them to a small transport ship adrift near an asteroid belt, power flickering. Hart approached cautiously, scanning for signs of a trap. It's run. On minimal life support, no hostiles detected, he reported. Looks legit. They docked with the transport. Inside, they found a handful of stranded travelers, a family of 3 humans and a reptilian pilot from another species. Their engines had blown out and they lacked the parts for repairs. Upon seeing Kise's glowing appearance, the group reacted with alarm at first, but Hart quickly explained she was a friend, meaning no harm. Kise offered to help with the engine meltdown. It took some effort, but her bioelectric interface stabilized the transport's power grid enough for them to limp to a nearby station for repairs. The grateful travelers offered them a small reward, food rations and a few universal couplings. Hart accepted, though he insisted it wasn't necessary. Kise regarded the family with quiet curiosity, especially a young child who gawked at her luminescence in open fascination. As they parted ways, Hart noticed the soft smile on Kise's face. She didn't speak of it, but he sensed the satisfaction she felt in helping others without being forced to do so. This was freedom, choosing to act, forging her own path. The glitch that once demanded a single purpose had loosened its grip, allowing her to redefine herself one act at a time. They continued on, the next few days passing in a blur of small adventures. At times, Kise's nest-building urge would flare, prompting her to gather scraps or textiles without realizing it. She'd pause, catch herself, then let out a frustrated laugh, dropping them in a pile. Hart would help distract her, sometimes by kissing her senseless, Sometimes by giving her a puzzle or a mechanical task, they grew closer through these small battles, forging a comfortable rhythm. One evening, while moored at a quiet fueling station, she suggested they return to the dream's bed early. A teasing light danced in her eyes. Once there, they shed their clothes and tangled in each other's arms, the lines between caution and need vanishing. The glitch spiked her desires in unexpected waves, but he sensed it was more than programming. Their passion burned hot and real, culminating in whispered confessions neither had planned to say aloud. Afterward, they lay tangled in the narrow bunk, hearts hammering, the small cabin filled with the scent of sweat and ozone. She pressed her face against his shoulder, breath warm. "I never expected to want anyone," she murmured, "but I want you." His throat felt tight. "I know the feeling," he said, voice cracking slightly. He curled an arm around her, letting that raw closeness speak for itself. By the time they reached a more civilized sector, word of Kise's unique abilities had spread quietly among small-time traders, mostly thanks to the families they'd helped. A few unscrupulous types made inquiries offering large sums of credits if she'd share her tech secrets. Hart bristled at such suggestions, worried it might lure more dangerous interest. Kise remained calm, but he could sense her tension whenever people tried to treat her like a commodity. Finally, they docked at a mid-sized trade station known as Thalora's Cradle, known for its diverse population and rumored hush-hush tech labs. Hart hoped they could find a reputable specialist to refine the override code. The station was surprisingly well-maintained, its corridors lined with bright murals of alien artistry. Kise looked around with wide eyes. "This place feels alive," she said softly. They found a discreet tech clinic, staffed by a pair of ex-Federation scientists who specialized in AI-human interface research. Hart introduced Kise, choosing his words carefully to avoid revealing everything. The scientists ran a few scans, impressed by her advanced design. They believed they could help dampen the nest subroutine further, maybe even remove it, but it would take a day or so of analyzing her unique code. Kise agreed, though Hart could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes at the idea of letting more strangers poke around her systems. "Will you stay with me?" she asked quietly as they walked out of the clinic, crossing an airy atrium decorated with holographic flowers. He squeezed her hand. "Of course," he promised. "I'm not leaving you alone with them." That night, they found a modest lodging on the station, an actual room with a real bed, bigger than the dream's bunk. Kise seemed both curious and anxious about the next day's procedure. They lay together under the dim glow of overhead lighting, her head on his chest. He trailed his fingers through her hair, feeling her body relax inch by inch.
"I trust you," she murmured at last, her voice barely audible. "I don't trust them, but I want to believe that maybe there are good people out here."
He kissed her temple. "We'll keep our guard up," he said gently. "But I think this is worth trying. You deserve to be free from that glitch." She tightened her hold on him, pressing closer. After a while, her breathing slowed into sleep. Hart lay awake a little longer, listening to her soft breath, staring at the alien ceiling. A swirl of protective feelings coursed through him. He realized he'd do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant fighting off unscrupulous forces or risking his own hide. It was a startling realization for someone who'd spent most of his life protecting only himself.
When morning came, they returned to the clinic. The scientists were polite, hooking Kise up to a sophisticated scanning bed lined with neural interface pads. She shot Hart a reassuring look as they began running the override scripts. The day wore on, the hum of machinery droning in his ears. He paced the waiting area, ignoring the curious glances of passing staff. Finally, after hours of tension, one of the scientists emerged, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've done what we can," he reported. "The subroutine is now dormant, integrated into her normal biological functions. She might still feel certain heightened nesting impulses occasionally, but it should no longer override her free will. The rest, well, she's one of a kind. We recommend caution if she experiences any anomalies." Hart nearly sagged in relief. "Thank you." He
Said, though he was mindful not to show too much vulnerability. "Can I see her?" The scientist nodded, leading him to the recovery room. Kise lay on a cushioned table, eyes closed, markings dim. Hart rushed to her side, gently brushing her hair back. Kise?
She stirred, slowly opening her eyes. For a moment they were unfocused, then sharpened on him. A faint smile tugged at her lips. I'm all right, she whispered. I feel lighter.
He exhaled, pressing her hand between both of his. They said it should be dormant now. You still yourself?
Her gaze flickered with relief. Yes, I still sense it, but it's muted. And that's good. She squeezed his hand. I owe you so much, Hart. He blinked back the sudden swirl of emotion, forcing a half laugh. You don't owe me anything. We did this together. Her eyes glistened. Without warning, she pulled him down, pressing a tender kiss to his lips. It startled the scientist, observing them, who cleared his throat and slipped away awkwardly. Hart returned the kiss, ignoring onlookers, letting gratitude and relief spill into that moment. The next day, with the procedure deemed successful, they left Theora's cradle. Kalisa's mood was buoyant, excitement shining in every lumen.
Whose pattern. She occasionally touched her own arm or chest, as if testing her response, then smiled when the compulsion didn't surge forward. A fresh sense of freedom radiated from her, and it was contagious.
Back on the Dream, they decided to plot a course to an uncharted star cluster, rumored to have breathtaking celestial phenomena, something neither had seen before. As Hart input the coordinates, Kise rested her head on his shoulder, a playful grin curving her lips. We can explore, or build a nest, but only if we both want to, she teased, eyes dancing with mischief. He laughed, wrapping an arm around her waist. A nest of our own design, he retorted, and she snorted softly in amusement. They launched, the Dream purring with newfound reliability. Side by side in the cockpit, they watched the stars shift as they angled away from the station. A hush fell over them, charged with possibility. Kise glanced at him, her fingers lacing through his. No matter what we find out there, she said softly, I want to face it with you.
He squeezed her hand, heart thudding in agreement. Count on it. Then he engaged the jump, and the stars stretched into brilliant lines. They leaped into the unknown, together.
In the swirling coat, Ritter of FTL, she slid across the small gap separating their seats, leaning against him. He kissed the top of her head, letting his lips linger, inhaling her subtle floral ozone scent. Gratitude, wonder, and a surge of tender affection mingled in his chest. They emerged into a luminous sector teeming with vibrant nebulae, a swirl of pinks, golds, and electric blues that lit up the cockpit with otherworldly radiance. Kalisa's breath caught in her throat, eyes wide with childlike awe. It's alive, she whispered, staring at the nebula. So beautiful. Hart smiled, adjusting the thrusters to drift among the cosmic clouds. I used to think there was nothing out here for me, he said, voice quiet. Just running, job to job, he glanced at her. But maybe I was wrong. She looked back at him, luminous patterns reflecting the nebula's glow. You've found someone worth staying for? She ventured, a slight tremor in her tone.
He felt his chest tighten with an unfamiliar but welcome warmth. Yeah, he breathed, pulling her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. I think so.
A hush enveloped them, filled only by the soft hum of the engines and the cosmic light dancing beyond the viewport. Kise leaned in, resting her
to his. He let his eyes drift shut, savoring the closeness and the heady sense of new beginnings. In that private cocoon of space, they whispered promises without words, hearts aligning in the swirl of starlight. The nest-building glitch might have nudged them together, but now every beat of their connection was purely, undeniably their own, spelled out in stolen kisses and entwined hands, forging a love story that transcended the wires and labs that birthed her and the lonely roads he once traveled.
When they finally shifted their gaze back to the viewport, the nebula parted to reveal a cluster of twinkling stars beckoning them onward. Hart smiled, giving the Dream a gentle push forward. The future spread before them like an uncharted map, and they would fill it with adventures, conflicts, laughter, and tenderness. Whatever the galaxy threw at them next, they would face it side by side, forging a bond that neither biology nor programming could ever truly control.